Chapter 4 The Refoaling. A crusted white glacier of frigid ice covered the glossy surface. Under the constant howl of bitter winds, a hoof rose up and planted its metal sole against it. A light scraping, a harder scraping, and the hoof carved a clear path across the surface. It was a curved line, a rainbow arch. After a few more scrapes, the glacier broke away, and the last of the frost fell loose from the surface of the glass. The reflection of a brown mare's face emerged, her goggles glinting unemotionally as she suddenly regarded herself. Leaning in closely, the Pegasus stared tightly past the window's reflection in an attempt to gaze inside, but, as she could only make out the vaguest shapes of tattered velvet heaps piled up in the center of the building's sealed atrium. With a fogging breath, the last pony stepped back and stared at the crumbling height of the Carousel Boutique. The boutique's top spire had collapsed in on itself, and from the resulting implosion there lay a scattered ring of debris around the cylindrical clothing shop. Both mahogany pony figures that had once graced the third story of the structure were miraculously intact, only now they were lying flank deep in the snow by the building's foundation, several icicles hanging off their lifeless snouts as their wooden hooves struggled endlessly with the decades worth of piling ash. The mare took a deep breath. Turning away from the building of former extravagance, she padded across a powdery, wind-blown field towards the heart of Ponyville. On either side of her, long collapsed tents and storage huts lingered in the frosted mire, their canvas bodies forever flapping in the wind like war flags left behind a hasty retreat. In mid-trot, the Pegasus briefly raised a hoof to her goggles and refocused the lens to a specific tint in order to highlight any hue of green that might show up across the barren landscape. Part of her felt immensely silly. She had rarely used that specific lens setting before, and many times she wondered why she even bothered to possess it. In the world of equestrian waste, the only green thing was the greed that bled out of the eyes of sky pirates and swindlers. The only time she ever saw plants was in the miraculous cargo that Bruce somehow scrounged up from time to time. In nature, the last time she saw vegetation was the first week immediately following the cataclysm, and it all turned to the color of her coat faster than she could comprehend starving without it. Green flame, on the other hoof, was a total different matter. She knew it existed, along with all the other elemental fires that dotted the wasteland. Acquiring it was no easy task, not so much because of the danger involved, but in the scarcity of finding it. Even if it did exist anywhere in the waste, with salvageable deposits, it would be a miracle if such a source hadn't been tapped into already by any and all of the mercantilist faction that spun their zeppelins under the twilight. The reason Pitt was willing to pay so much for it, she knew, was that even the tiniest fume of the flame would put the mangy baboon ahead of the pack when it came to economic competition. Some things in the ruined world were actually capable of turning murder and bribery into work of art, so long as the treasure was valued highly enough. One consolation the pony gave herself, aside from the incalculably grand score it would land herself with some green flame, was the fact that she wouldn't have to be slaying or imprisoning anything to extract the substance this time. In the history of Equestria, green flame was something akin to a magical essence, not a natural phenomenon. So long as Cantaladian magic existed, green flame did as well. So when Pitt made it clear that the green flame had been sighted, and in Ponyville of all places, it shook the ghosts in her attic twice as hard. She was prepared, doubly this time. She wore 2 fresh bracelets of unicorn horns, one on each hoof. If there was any green flames to be had in Ponyville, the magical bones tied to her limbs would find it, especially if her lenses failed her, which they very likely would. The filly was prepared for a light, any light, be it from horns or from the horizon, to alert her when she was near her goal. Until then, she had nothing but sacred ground to cover, and with each hoofing step she took, she felt like she was driving a knife further down her own chest. Gazing left and right, she shuddered to find rows of houses doubling, tripling. She knew that she was now deep in the thick of Ponyville, deep into the frosted mane of yesterday's shadow. The wind settled suddenly in a calm gasp of irony, so that the bitter howling gave way to gentle fluttering snow that punctuated the melancholy of the last pony's long-delayed return to the land of her foaling and dying. The pony softly pattered to a stop on the edge of Ponyville's former town square, now a scattered bed of random wooden shards sticking out of piled high snow. Bits and pieces of carts and wagons and merchant stands were splayed all around her, as if a vomit of petrified splinters had rained down from the sky. She squinted her eyes through the goggles and made out what looked to be a bent metal arch. Stepping slowly towards it, she realized it was the town's flagpole, a memorial established to the setting of the village by Earth ponies 12 decades before the beginning of the Fourth Age. At the base of the lewdly bent flagpole was a concrete slab, and in haunting legibility the pony could spot writing carved long ago into the dried surface with a haystack. Faust Meyer and Dyer. Alongside the cursive words of the village's founder were two hoofprints, that of an old mare and a tiny mark belonging to a little foal. The lone Pegasus reached forward through the drifting snow and instinctually placed her hoof over that of the foal's imprint first, quite visibly dwarfing it. But that didn't induce her to sigh as much as when she next raised her hoof over the founding mare's imprint, and found that her hoof was even larger still. Gulping, she shuddered to look up across the panoramic desolation of her former home, buried in time and ashes. The post office had shattered in half, its eastern side crumbling and exposing a skeleton of ramshackled cabinets and billowing seas of papery scraps deep inside. The town's central fountain with its life-size statue of Princess Celestia had been bent savagely by age, so that the royal effigy leaned precariously towards the side, its perforated alicorn wings frozen in mildew and acidic deterioration. Along a brick wall flanking the garden there fluttered a tattered poster featuring the ghosts of three goggled ponies garbed in blue, a discolored squadron of Pegasi soaring impressionistically past their proud profiles. The two-story bed and breakfast that sat, hunched and bowed, at the center of the main street still maintained an iconographic silhouette in the pony's mind. She stared at it, up past it, and briefly blinked her eyes. In that sharp blink the sulphuric haze of Cloudsdale hovered in a sunny blue sky, just a nose tilt above the roof of the inn, and the lush trees waving gently beyond it. Then the blink ended, and the northern sky was once more a gray madness, howling coldly over the frozen holocaust. A whining howl, like foals giggling. The Pegasus gasped sharply and looked to her right. A guild sign was hanging by one last rusted chain from the entrance to a hollowed-out store. The hinge upon which the sign dangled creaked and whined in the cold wind, piercing the pony's ears from afar. She exhaled long and hard, feeling a heartbeat ricochet up her armored chest and thrash against the sore lump in the scavenger's throat. The filly paced her breast, trying mentally to stitch herself back together. She was here for the green flame, nothing more. There was no point to this lingering. But as she padded down the abandoned alleyways and torn streets and shattered courtyards of her place of birth, her hoofs slowed and slowed, as if the white fields she was wading across were really pools of ivory tar, weighing her down, forcing her to convulse and twitch until her neck craned about and fed her eyes more and more and more. The town library. The tall and twisted tree was, miraculously, the most intact structure in the entirety of Ponyville. The perfect irony. The only things devastated about the treehouse was everything Pony made about it. The front door had long fallen off the thing. The windows had been shattered. The miniature observatory platform constructed at the apex of the tree had completely vanished. The only thing in relatively good shape was the lower balcony ledge, now a gaggle of haphazardly angled planks struggling to stay aloft a widely stretching branch that stretched further than the pony remembered it. It was almost as if the tree had still grown past the cataclysm, but no single leaf could be seen upon the gnarled, burnt black limbs of the thing, and from a distant glance the tree house was about as hollow as the pony felt that very moment of melancholic sightseeing. Sugar Cube Corner, nestled in the thick of Ponyville, just north of downtown, was a jaded specter of its former self. All of the bright paint had been stripped from the building's siding, as if a giant hoof took a blowtorch to the entire structure. The ground beneath it was positively scorched, suggesting a horrible fire that had consumed the building, along with the rest of Equestria from the ground up. The higher story windows had caved in, positively melted, and in place of shades of pink were instead brown fluffs of matter as several bits of tattered furniture leaked out from the second floor like a bursting bud of rusted cotton. The toy store. The pony's heart started, for she had completely and utterly forgotten about the place up until that very naked moment of awestruck gazing. Brief flashes of recollection pelted her mind, of a merry structure built into the absurd shape of a jester's cap, in brightly colors merrily crisscrossing the surface of the building. It was now a tangled mess of exposed concrete and steel supports. Trotting up close, the Pegasus could spot a veritable sea of tin shrapnel, the remains of several handcrafted wind-up toys that used to line the shelves of a musically enchanting store that toasted a young filly's coat as she once beat her infantile wings to get a bouncing look at the place's fantastic wares surrounding her. By the time another hour had passed, the pony found herself haplessly wandering the halls of collapsed hotels, navigating the run-down corridors of empty apartment buildings, shuffling through the gray misted kitchens of dark-lit restaurants, infested with hives of pests and vermin. She saw paintings, photographs, portraits of dead ponies from an age forever gone. And then, the very first moment of those faces started to become familiar, she bucked under a sudden nausea and swiftly galloped her way back into the blinding snow. Leaning against a collapsed wagon, its wheels still hauntingly spinning in the wind, the pony fought to catch her breath. She knew that this was going to be an unpleasant sojourn, but the last Pegasus in no way expected this degree of collapse, of the sensation of 20,000 atmospheres hammering into her lungs from all sides, of how torturously cold the world suddenly felt, even at sea level. She was there in search of green flame, true, but unlike any other trip into the ruins of Equestria, she couldn't bring herself to pilfer anything, not even scavenging one speck of debris. She could have sworn she strolled by a record disc or two in one of the apartments, but even that she refused to indulge herself in. This was Ponyville. Her saddlebags were empty. Glancing up from the wagon, the pony finally caught her breath, only to lose it again as she realized that she was no longer staring at Ponyville anymore. The entire north side of the village, which should have been at least 5 blocks thick with buildings, was nowhere to be seen. Trotting cautiously forward, the Pegasus squinted through her goggles and glanced down past her hooves. Indeed, as she discovered at the end of one last crumbling hoofstep, the landscape dipped down suddenly below the edge of a vicious drop. The mist cleared momentarily in a harsh breeze of cold wasteland wind, revealing the gigantic ravine at least 100 meters deep, and at the bottom of this inexplicable canyon was a splattering of demolished buildings that looked as if they had been thrown viciously straight into one another. The pony remembered, as she often did, that the cataclysm which consumed Equestria was not only a vanquisher of Pegasi, but of earth ponies and unicorns as well. While Cloudsdale fell in a crumbling chaos and ruin, the world bucked under hoof everyone else as well, so that whenever she swung the harmony low enough to see the naked bosom of the waste, she would occasionally stumble upon these terrestrial scars, these savage dips and breaks in the crust of the world. And one such tremor happened to be right there, in the heart of Ponyville, right under her nose. There was no telling what the moonfalls did to the rest of the village that she had yet to see. But this wasn't bringing her anywhere. She was losing focus. She lost her focus the moment she had set flight coordinates to these sacred grounds. What was worst, or perhaps best, was that she knew it. Of all the unprofessional mistakes the last pony could have possibly made, coming to that nightmare afterimage of a life long gone was quite possibly her worst choice. At that point, she told herself, actually spotting and getting the green flame would be a consolation prize. Walking out of Ponyville with her sanity would be the only true victory. With a hardened resolve, the mare turned completely around, her flank to ravine, and trotted swiftly back in the direction from which she woefully came. She would have made good distance between downtown and Ponyville and the Harmony. Only a bright strobe of light emanated suddenly from both of her hooves. Gasping, she stopped in time to gape down at both of her front limbs. The necklaces of horns were frothing with a fine purple mist, the brightest she had ever seen them glow in all her days of tomb raiding. Something in Ponyville was emitting a magical surge so strong that almost every unicorn bone on the Pegasus's articles overloaded at once. The energy was of such intensity that twin ovals of snow melted beneath where her horseshoes had been planted. "What the hey?" she obligatorily murmured. "That can't be right. The ravine must have ruptured and exposed the ley line." Her exclamation was cut prematurely short at the sight of a winged shadow suddenly sweeping over the white snowbank within which she was stumbling. A sharp gasp. She thrust her saddlebags forward, clasped her rifle while it was airborne, and extended it with a clack-a-clack and a glare. Her goggled eyes scanned the snow-pelted horizon of Ponyville's ghostly buildings towards the south. Squinting, she adjusted the lenses with one hoof while leaning against the rifle with the other. Every possible shade and tint flickered across her gaze, bathing the Ponyvillian waste in several different colors, until an aura appeared, faintly, then disappeared. With a frustrated grunt, the mare all but tore off her goggles and blinked her naked scarlets at the source of the brief aura. The bold, round structure of City Hall, the tallest building in Ponyville, stood straight before her. It was amazingly intact, with only random sections of the uppermost stories crumbling off towards its west end. Less than half of the windows were shattered, and the outer doors still hung perfectly in their frames. With a steady breath, the pony lowered her goggles once more, keeping her eyes locked on the side of the building. She flicked one last time through the different lenses, and again she caught it, like a shadow of a hide-and-seeker peeking in and out from behind a huge tree stump. An aura had faded from view, a green aura, and all was once again dull and clear, with City Hall at the epicenter of the passing phenomenon. The pony's brow furrowed. In direct opposition with her throbbing pulse, she padded bravely forward, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She shuffled up the front steps of the City Hall building, stopping briefly to gaze from its dilapidated outer railings up to its grand height of half-shingled overhangs and peeling paint. If there was a source of green flame inside the structure, she could detect no hint from that proximity. But in the graveyard of a city she didn't want to be, she didn't know any other place to go. So, with a grunt of determination, she marched up to the double doors, protruded a golden blade from her left horseshoe, and pried into the space between the hinges, pulling with all of her might. After a strain, the doors flung open into a chasm of darkness. Ash and dust scattered like a curtain, briefly blanketing her goggles. She wiped them clean with the side of her hoof, glanced inside, and immediately wished she hadn't. A painful wince ripped across the pony's features as she wrenched her gaze downward. A few shuddering breaths, and she bravely looked ahead, trotting forward as she approached a veritable heap of dead bodies, skeletons and husks of grainy piles of former Ponyvillians, stretched across the floor like a necropolitan carpet. She had seen sights like this in so many ruined cities, the Temple of the Sun in Stalingrad, the University at Philadelphia, even some of the fallen structures of Cloudsdale. Dozens, if not hundreds of ponies had run for cover under the roof of a large interior building where their remains would be petrified en masse by a blast wave of cataclysm. But every one of those sights were mere curiosities, things to glance upon and then unemotionally rummage through for resources. None of those sights, however grim, viciously gutted her. None like this. The air was filled with a perpetually sterile rust. And yet, as she marched deeper into the cornucopia of bodies, so many haunting scents came to her, riding the flanks of hundreds of cheerfully giggling voices in the vestiges of her mind, recalling ponies going about their business in the warm afternoon breeze, of foals playing games with each other along the beaten path, of loved ones nuzzling in the park and families picnicking on the hillsides. Against her better judgment, the pony found herself gazing down at the forms, her heart pulsing sharply with each successive body she glanced at, possibly seeing or possibly not seeing one telltale hint after another of some pony or something that she would recognize. A hair bow, a lock of sapphires, a cowgirl hat, a mailbag, party streamers, anything whatsoever. None of these appeared to her, but the filly was too miserable to be relieved. If anything, she felt a pang of shame wash over her because of her anticipation. There were several unicorn skeletons amongst the pile, more than she had ever expected for the likes of Ponyville. In the cold pale light wafting into the dark cavern of the town hall, several fresh horns glinted before her goggled eyes. She knew that the magical channeling of her two bracelets had almost entirely worn out, but she couldn't goad herself into sawing off new horns, not this time. She trotted into the center of the room, above a peculiar pair of skeletons. The body of a middle-aged Pegasus, its skull still splotched with a faded mat of blonde straws, was cradling the husk of a tiny unicorn filly, barely past its full years. It had been so long since the lone survivor first began exploring the graveyards of Equestria, but it never ceased to amaze her how the landscape still provided snapshots of the cataclysmic horror. Gazing up, the pony stared into the tall, stretching shadows of the town hall building, its balconies and upper floors reaching at least a dozen meters high. She remembered another moment with another horror, when Nightmare Moon returned to this very spot, promising an age of endless night. She remembered seeing the event with her naked eyes, and how her tiny body trembled upon the echoing cackles of the unholy harbinger of doom. And yet it was a brief horror, an event that was resolved by the elements of harmony within the space of a day. If there was a lesson in life that the last pony could etch into the annals of irony, it's that the true apocalypse is always, always unannounced. No pony could have foreseen the endless twilight, and in a matter of time no pony would ever know it happened. She sighed heavily. All that the town hall building offered was memories and darkness. There was no green flame. Ever exact, the Pegasus nevertheless reached a hoof up to her goggles and rescanned the shadowy interior. She looked for all the possible flickering shades of her elusive target. From the ceiling beams down to the floorboards and the platforms in between, she gazed at everything, but found nothing. She was just about to turn and leave with a disgruntled breath when a rustling noise pricked her ear to the side. Jerking to her left, she blinked at a pile of bodies along the wall. Everything was still, and then the rustling resurfaced. Cautiously, the filly trotted towards the shadowy corner. The rustling stopped, but there was definitely something ahoof. The last pony's sight zeroed in on one skeleton in particular, an earth pony of elder years, judging from the brittle bone structure. Aside from the usual ash and skin flakes, the skeleton was sporting what appeared to be a pair of eyeglasses and a faded white collar and a tattered green ascot. Before she could reflect on the finer details of the corpse, the Pegasus narrowed her goggle eyes and bent low to inspect it closer.